Welcome back. So you just went through the practice for solving trig equations, and here we are extending that and looking at some application problems. So solve square root of 2 times sine of x minus 1 equals 0. So we know we want to isolate the sine of x. So in doing so, we get sine of x equaling 1 over root 2, which is the same as saying root 2 over 2. So with your unit circle, you would identify that sine is positive root 2 over 2 at pi over 4 and 3 pi over 4. But noticing we want our angle measures within degrees, so we would have 45 degrees and 135 degrees. Okay? So when you see this blob, it's really the same kind of ideas. You're solving the problem, so we're gonna have blob equals pi over 4, blob equals 3 pi over 4. This blob it's something. It's something. And really where it's gonna be useful is when you solve this last part, so it all builds you up to here. So you solve and we say, oh, x equals this, and we're saying, oh, well, something, blob, something equals these two values. Well, then we get to here, and think of this 2x plus 5 as blob. So you would solve, you would isolate, you would get sine of 2x plus 5 would be equaling 1 over root 2. You would solve that, so you would get 45 and 135 again, but then that's not going to equal x. That would equal 2x plus 5. So you should be getting, as a result of this, we should find that our two angle measures are 20 degrees and 65 degrees. Because we do not have just straight x, we have 2x plus 5 equaling the two angle measures. Okay, moving on. So the tide near the ocean, the Outer Banks in North Carolina, where I like to go visit and relax. We can utilize this function. So at what time would the tide be 14 feet? So 14 equals 35 minus 28 cosine of pi for 6.2 t. So the technique you just saw using blob, or really you'll often see me just use u. What I can do here is rewrite this as 14 equals 35 minus 28 cosine of u, where I'll put u equals pi over 6.2 t. And I'll solve for u, but then I'm going to substitute u back in and then solve for t. So what that looks like for us is, in solving for cosine, so you're subtracting and then dividing, we get 0.75 equals cosine of u. Okay, so 0.75 is not a fraction on our unit circle, so we actually have to use our graphing calculator, and in doing so, on this side, so we use our cosine of 0.75, because, now whether we're in degree or radian, because u is in terms of pi, we're going to want to be in radians. So doing that, we get 0.7, so arc cosine of 0.75 is roughly 0.7227. Okay, now this is approximately what u is equal to. This, if you remember with our cosine, when we have to approximate, there are two values. So this is going to be in quadrant 1. So cosine's positive in quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. So our other value is going to be 2 pi minus 0.7227. And this is going to be what we have in quadrant 4. Okay, so we have two values from our cosine. So this is approximately, so just doing 2 pi minus, choose this value up here, and we get 5.5605. Okay, now these are not the answers. these are what u is equal to. So we're now going to set each of these equal to pi over 6.2, solve for t, and we'll get our time. So when you do that, you should get time values. You should get time values of approximately 1.43 and 10.97. Now, these are not the actual times because we're thinking time on a clock. So if 0 represents 12 a.m., this is approximately what? We'll say 1 minute and 40.43 of 60. That's roughly, it's close to a half of 60 minutes. So at 1:30 a.m. and very close to 11 a.m. as well. So at 1:30 a.m. and 11:30 a.m. the tide's at 14 feet. Okay? So it's really the technique of replacing this inner part with a single variable, solving it, and going back at the end and saying, oh, well, okay, 0.7227 equal to pi over 6.2 and t, and solve, and do the same thing for this one, 5.5605 equals pi over 6.2 and solving it. That's one technique that can make this process easier for you when we have an inner function within our trig function. Okay, so best of luck in continuing this and preparing for this unit test.